What if there were a real plant that could rebuild soil without fertilizer, without irrigation, and without yearly planting? It is called comfrey. Its roots reach deep into subsoil that most crops never touch, pulling up minerals that modern farms now buy by the ton. Cut it down, and it regrows stronger. Use its leaves, and the soil improves instead of degrading. For centuries, farmers across Europe and Russia planted it along every field edge. Then, in less than 50 years, it disappeared. Not because it failed, because it worked! At a time when fertilizer costs are rising and topsoil is vanishing, a plant like this should be everywhere. Instead, it is almost nowhere. And the reason it vanished has very little to do with farming, and everything to do with how the system is built. Each year, the system continues. Food gets more expensive, soils become harder to recover, and farmers lose more control over their own land. This was not a weed. It was not an ornamental herb. Comfrey was a working plant, cultivated with clear intention across the British Isles, Germany, Russia, and eventually North America. Medieval farmers called it knitbone because poultices from its leaves were believed to heal fractures. But its real power was in the soil. By the 18th century, comfrey appeared in agricultural manuals across Europe. Farmers planted it along field edges to stabilize banks and prevent erosion. They grew it in orchards where its dense foliage suppressed weeds and held moisture. They cultivated it around livestock paddocks because animals ate it readily and thrived. Russian comfrey was developed by farmers in Russia as a hybrid strain, bred for higher yields and faster regrowth. It spread across the Soviet Union as a crop for feeding cattle and enriching exhausted collective farmland. In England, the plant became so common that entire fields were dedicated to its production. Farmers did not buy fertilizer, they grew it. But a plant that produces its own fertility does not fit into every system. And that mismatch explains what happened next. The secret to comfrey's power lay beneath the surface. While most crops send roots only inches into soil, comfrey reaches down 6 to 10 feet. Its taproot penetrates layers that shallow-rooted plants cannot touch. This matters because soil is not uniform. The topsoil where most crops feed becomes depleted over time. Potassium washes away, calcium leaches downward. Trace minerals like boron, iron, and manganese sink beyond the reach of annual roots. Farmers compensate by adding synthetic fertilizers, but comfrey does something different. Its deep roots function like a pump. They draw potassium, calcium, phosphorus, and trace minerals from the subsoil and store them in the leaves. When those leaves are cut and left on the surface, the minerals return to the topsoil in a form that other plants can use. One study found comfrey leaves contain 2 to 3 times more potassium than most green manures. This is not fertilization, this is mineral cycling. The plant does not add nutrients from outside the system. It relocates what is already there, pulling fertility upward from depths that would otherwise remain locked away. And the process does not stop. Every cut redistributes minerals. Every season, the topsoil grows richer. That raises a bigger question. Why would anyone replace this with something you have to buy? Most fertilizers vanish the moment you apply them. Comfrey does the opposite. Cut it to the ground, and within weeks it returns, thick and green, ready to be harvested again. A single plant can be cut 4 to 5 times per growing season. Each cut yields pounds of nutrient-dense biomass. Farmers used this biomass in 3 ways. The first was mulch. Leaves were piled around crops to suppress weeds and to slowly release minerals as they decomposed. The second was compost activation. Comfrey's high nitrogen content accelerated the breakdown of carbon-heavy materials, turning waste into usable soil faster. The third was liquid feed. Leaves were steeped in water for weeks until they dissolved into a dark, potent tea that could be diluted and applied directly to plants. None of this required outside inputs. No factory, no purchase, no shipping. The plant regenerated from the same root crown year after year, decade after decade. Some comfrey patches in England have been harvested continuously for over a century without replanting. This is fertility without dependence, a system that closes the loop entirely. Once established, comfrey asks nothing but to be cut and used. And yet, a plant that produces free fertilizer forever does not serve every interest equally. Comfrey was not just a soil amendment, it was a complete farm partner. Livestock farmers across Europe fed comfrey to pigs, poultry, rabbits, and cattle. The leaves were high in protein, comparable to alfalfa, but easier to grow in poor conditions. Pigs in particular gained weight rapidly when comfrey supplemented their diet. Rabbits raised on comfrey showed improved coat quality and health. Poultry flocks ate the leaves fresh or dried without hesitation. In orchards, comfrey played a different role. Growers planted it beneath apple, pear, and plum trees. The dense foliage shaded out competing weeds without chemicals. The deep roots did not compete with shallow fruit tree roots for water or nutrients. Instead, they pulled minerals up from below and deposited them at the surface where the trees could access them. Moisture retention improved, soil structure softened, trees grew stronger. One plant served 3 functions simultaneously. It fed animals, nourished trees, and rebuilt soil, all without a single purchased input. This was integrated farming before the term existed. But integration has a cost. It requires knowledge, careful observation, and patience. It does not scale easily or standardize well. And once farming began to change, those traits stopped being advantages. The 20th century transformed agriculture. Tractors replaced horses, synthetic nitrogen replaced manure, monocultures replaced diversity, and scale replaced resilience. In this new system, success meant uniformity, crops that ripened together, inputs that arrived in bags, outputs that could be measured, priced, and sold. Every link in the chain became a transaction. Comfrey did not fit. It could not be patented. It did not require annual seed purchases. It eliminated the need for synthetic fertilizers, which had become a multi-billion-dollar industry. A plant that produced free fertility forever was not an asset in an economy built on repeated sales. Agricultural extension services began promoting alternatives. Chemical fertilizers were precise, measurable, and backed by corporate research budgets. Comfrey was old, unbranded, and impossible to monetize. Slowly, the recommendations shifted. New farmers learned about nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium from a bag. They never learned it could come from a leaf. The plant was not banned. It was simply ignored. And in agriculture, being ignored is almost as effective as being erased. Within a generation, farmers who once relied on comfrey had no successors who knew its name. But ignoring a plant is not enough when memory still lingers. Something more was needed to complete the disappearance. In the 1970s, researchers identified compounds in comfrey called pyrrolizidine alkaloids. In concentrated doses, these compounds caused liver damage in laboratory animals. The studies used extracts far more potent than anything a farmer would encounter in the field, but the headlines did not distinguish. Regulatory agencies issued warnings. Comfrey supplements were pulled from shelves. The word spread that comfrey was dangerous, toxic, and unsuitable for any use. Health food stores removed it. Herbalists distanced themselves. Gardening guides dropped it from their pages. What the warnings failed to mention was context. Traditional farm use involved external application, mulch, compost, and animal feed as part of balanced diets. No one was consuming concentrated root extracts every day. The danger was real, only in forms that farmers had never used. But nuance, does not survive headlines. Fear spreads faster than understanding. A plant that had been trusted for centuries was suddenly suspect. Farmers who might have considered growing it hesitated. Those who still remembered it grew quieter. The safety narrative did not need to be accurate. It only needed to create doubt. And once doubt took root, it became far easier to erase the plant itself. The final stage of erasure was not dramatic. It was administrative. Extension services updated their recommendations. Comfrey was no longer mentioned in soil health guides. University agriculture programs taught synthetic inputs as standard practice. Seed catalogs, responding to demand, removed comfrey from their listings. Nurseries stopped carrying it. The infrastructure of knowledge simply moved on. New farmers trained in the 1980s and 90s never encountered comfrey in their education. They learned to measure fertility in parts per million and to correct deficiencies with purchased amendments. The idea of a plant that could do the same work for free was not rejected. It was never introduced. Older farmers who remembered comfrey retired or passed away. Their knowledge went with them. The patches they had maintained were plowed under or left to be overtaken by other growth. A few plants survived in neglected corners, unrecognized by those who walked past. The plant did not go extinct. It simply became invisible. Present but unnamed. Growing but unknown. And so a technology that had rebuilt soil for centuries was pushed to the margins. While modern agriculture spent billions trying to solve the same problems from scratch. The cracks in industrial agriculture are now impossible to ignore. Topsoil loss accelerates, fertilizer prices climb, yields plateau despite increasing chemical inputs. Farmers are searching for alternatives that do not depend on systems beyond their control. Regenerative agriculture offers a different path. It focuses on building soil health through natural processes rather than external amendments. Cover crops, reduced tillage, integrated livestock, and perennial plantings form the foundation, and comfrey fits this framework perfectly. Modern regenerative farmers are planting comfrey along swales and orchard rows. They are using it to jumpstart compost piles and produce liquid fertilizers on site. They are feeding it to chickens and pigs as part of diversified rotations. The plant that was erased from mainstream agriculture is returning through the back door. Research is catching up. Studies confirm what traditional farmers always knew. Comfrey accumulates minerals at rates that rival or exceed synthetic fertilizers. Its biomass breaks down rapidly, releasing nutrients in plant-available forms. Its deep roots improve soil structure and water infiltration. This is not nostalgia. It is strategy. A closed-loop system that reduces costs, builds resilience, and frees farmers from dependency on volatile input markets. The infrastructure that kept this knowledge buried is starting to fail. Comfrey did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it worked too well. A plant that rebuilds soil without fertilizer leaves no room for fertilizer sales. A plant that regrows from the same root forever leaves no room for annual seed purchases. A plant that feeds livestock, enriches orchards, and restores degraded land simultaneously leaves no room for the specialists who profit from separating those functions. Comfrey is not primitive. It is self-sufficient. And self-sufficiency is incompatible with an economy built on dependency. The pattern is familiar. Indigenous crops that sustain communities without external inputs are systematically marginalized. Not because they fail, but because they succeed without generating revenue. What cannot be sold cannot be promoted. What cannot be controlled cannot be scaled. What cannot be measured cannot be valued. But the soil does not care about economics. It responds to biology. And comfrey has been rebuilding soil since before the first synthetic fertilizer was ever manufactured. The knowledge was never truly lost. It was buried, waiting for conditions to change. Now, as industrial systems falter under their own weight, the plants that were pushed aside are being remembered. Comfrey asks nothing but to be planted and cut. It offers fertility, resilience, and freedom. All it requires is that we recognize what was always there.